Hi, Sophie!
Hi, Sin.
Hi, everyone. And welcome to the reboot of It Can't Be Helped, Episode 1.
Finally.
And today, we're talking about a very special anime.
Well, 5.
Well, 3.
60%.
And the anime is called Force 5 / Krypton Force.
So this involves Canada and Australia.
We're Canada and Australia. So, Sophie.
Yes, Sin.
Tell me more about Force 5 / Krypton Force.
Alright, so something that a lot of distributors ran into when they were trying to localize anime for television in North America was that North American cartoon series were expected to have very, very long seasons. Like, they were expecting 60 to 100 episodes. And the reason they did that is because they wanted them to be syndicated. There to be so many episodes, you just had tons of them, you could run them every day in whatever order you wanted. And that was the magic number. The magic number is it's that syndication number. Anime series didn't really work like that. I know Reborn has 200 episodes. But the average anime series was maybe a little less than that.
Right.
So they were pretty long, but you're talking 50 to 70. So they weren't quite in that space that would give them the syndication number. The example everyone kind of knows is Robotech.
Right.
Because Robotech started off as an attempt to localize Macross. Macross is not long enough for any of the networks to pick it up. So what they did was they got Macross, Southern Cross, and Mospeada. Mospeada? I have no idea how you pronounce it. And then they stuck them together and said it's actually one really long story that just takes place over 3 acts.
Mm-hmm.
It's this generational story, so the end of the Macross thing, and then it's now we're in Southern Cross, and we'll just add some dialogue and some clips to say, well, actually, Southern Cross is just the future of what you saw before. So technically, it's all one series.
That's very smart.
Yeah, it also causes a lot of headaches because they still own Robotech, so there's all these issues with the localization of Macross and who has the rights to localize Macross versus Robotech. It's kind of a mess. Force 5 is the lesser known Canadian equivalent of that. Where instead of trying to make a bunch of series seem like one series, they just said it's an anthology show. So it's Force 5. It's actually 5 different series, and the idea is you run one Monday, one Tuesday, one Wednesday, one Thursday, one Friday. So every Monday, it's every Monday it's the Formators, every Tuesday it's Grendizer, every etc. And that's how they got to the magic episode count with these.
So I saw 3 out of the 5 episodes you sent me.
Yeah.
That's a lot of things to keep in your head for every Monday, every Tuesday, every Wednesday, or whatever.
Well, I've got news for you.
Mm-hmm.
They're all out of order, so it doesn't matter. One of the things we're going to watch ends on a cliffhanger. And I actually I have most of these. Most of the VHSs that came out, I have them. And the cliffhanger at the end of Volume 6, Volume 7 starts with a completely unrelated story. That's got nothing to do with what you just saw. Right. So what we're watching now is not really Force 5. It gets very complicated because there was a British distributor called Krypton Force. And they bought Force 5. But they didn't sell it as Force 5. They sold it as Krypton Force. And I'm not entirely sure why this, again, may be a rights issue. And the way they did it was they went through all the Force 5 things, and they cut out every reference to Force 5.
What?
Yeah, this is why, you watched 3 of these, the term Force 5 does not appear anywhere.
No.
You never see that written down.
No.
And you'll also notice a lot of the editing is very, very, abrupt.
I thought maybe that's an artistic choice.
You'll see an opening sequence, and then the opening sequence will end, and then it will cut immediately to the middle of a line. That's because that's them cutting out all the parts that say Force 5.
Oh my god.
And all the Force 5 credits are being like removed from this thing very, very crudely. Because they don't have the original like masters, they just have the Force 5 copies.
Hmm.
The other interesting thing about this is like it's sort of hard to get across now because what you were watching is you're watching my personal copies that I got off VHS
Hmm.
and digitized, and they're very, very old and they're very crappy, but they looked terrible at the time. Even when they were new, this was absolute dogshit quality. And at the time, like as a kid, I'm watching these and I'm like, there's something off about this.
Hi, Sin here. I'd like to introduce my co-host Sophie to anybody who's new to the podcast. Sophie went to film school, and so she's very knowledgeable about various aspects of cinema, as well as technical film things. She's also a doctor of philosophy, and that is why she's also knowledgeable about everything else. As the yin to my yang, she's the brains of the podcast. Plus, she's too weak to open her front door. Outside of the intellectual pursuits, her hobbies include baking, reading, and collecting snail memorabilia. Back to the podcast.
Essentially, North America and most of Asia use a kind of signal called NTSC. And then Europe and most of I think like the Middle East and Oceania use PAL. This is not relevant anymore because HDMI has superseded it. Like, doesn't matter anymore. But back when you had to worry about like analog signals and scan lines and stuff, there was a noticeable difference between the kind of signal you needed to get NTSC and the kind of signal that you got from PAL. And what's happened with the Krypton Force things, looking at them now, I can see exactly what it is that they're very, very rough transfers from an NTSC recording to a PAL recording. So all the color is like bleeding around the edges, everything looks off, and like the
Yeah.
timing is slightly weird.
Yeah.
So like this British company did not have access to they did not have the master copy of anything. It literally looks like they just taped it off the TV and just chopped bits out.
They got it from LimeWire.
Essentially, yeah. And there's a lot of weird stuff around these tapes. And like I've done my own research here, so we can talk about this a fair amount. But like I don't know which one we're gonna start with, but like the important thing is they all start with that man.
Hi kids, I've been asked to tell you about that great space cartoon. There's a feature film to each series and 14 episodes as well.
Oh my god, that man.
Sin, do you want to tell us about your first experience with the Krypton Force trailer man?
Well, well, that man will definitely haunt my dreams because he appears on screen and it's all very disorienting. Like there's images and colors, and he talks in this weird voice really fast, trying to explain the history of what we're about to see, and it's
Yeah.
just incomprehensible.
I know his narration by heart because I watched these so much as a child. So to set the stage, it's a two-pronged assault. It's an assault on your ears and an assault on your eyes. You are subjected to a series of flashing lights and sort of weird geometric patterns, and it looks like a PC paint program.
Yes.
And I am absolutely sure that's what it is, and we'll get into why later on. So all these colors are strobing on and off, and then this strange shadow flips across the screen. And I'm going to send Sin like a still of that shadow because it haunts me to this day because I don't know what it is. It looks like it's supposed to be a person.
Yeah, when I saw that shadow, my brain interpreted it as a person, but
Yeah.
looking at it now, you know what this is?
What?
Remember the monster from the Callisto Protocol trailer?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It all makes sense. Right. So I often thought maybe it's the outline of the guy that narrates the trailer. It's not.
Hi kids, I've been asked to tell you about that great space cartoon. There's a feature film to each series and 14 episodes as well.
It's just some weird shadow entity that exists in Krypton Force. You'll also notice it says First Call. It doesn't say Krypton Force.
Yeah, what is that about?
First Call is the Australian distributor. Because what happened was, there's a Krypton Force fandom out there. And, about 7-8 years ago, I was in contact with these people trying to talk about it. Like, what the hell is this weird thing? And, First Call is the Australian distributor. They all said to me, this is Krypton Force people in the UK and in the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
So we have independent confirmation from 2 different countries that this was not on those tapes, it was only on the Australian tapes. Even though the guy is British. There's a very, very, creepy end to this tale that I will save till the very end of this discussion.
Oh my God.
But it leads to the possibility of us uncovering who this man might have been. So the things I want to focus on this man, right? This was only on the Australian ones. It's the name of the Australian distributor, but he has an East London accent. Okay. He says, "Hi kids, I've been asked to tell you about a great space cartoon." Right. He does not look like a character you would invent to get children to watch something. He looks like a caricature of a person.
Mm-hmm.
This is what strikes me about him, because you'd think if this was just some shit company trying to sell something to kids, they would have a robot or a spaceman.
Yeah.
This looks like a real person. Looks like they copied a photo of someone. And also he is dressed in a way that is like someone who was slightly out of fashion in the early 90s would have dressed like this.
Yep.
So in my head, I am fairly convinced this is actually just the guy that was reading it out. And they just got a photo of him and traced it in this computer paint program.
Oh my God, definitely.
Now, this narration, which is on every one of these tapes, is clearly a first take. And they leave all the mistakes in. Because he says, there's a feature film to each series and 14 episodes as well. Well.
14 episodes as well. So don't miss them.
Halfway through, his voice speeds up. You might think, is this an error with the tape? No. They all do this. I think it's just they realized how boring it was.
Somebody's pointing at the clock in the background.
Yes.
Who lead them a merry dance all over the universe.
Number 3 in the series is the Cybots, 3 humanoid types who protect the Princess Aura and fight evil through the galaxy.
There's kind of clip shows from the series behind it.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing that you notice about these is that they have this frame overlaid on them that's the same PC Paint program aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
But the video has not been resized to fit the frame. That's been pasted over, so about half the image is missing. And granted, you still see the center of the image, but there's plenty of shots that just straight up you don't understand what's supposed to be happening on screen. Yeah. Now, more Krypton Force trivia that's come out of my discussions with other true Krypton Force fans.
Uh-huh.
While they're talking, you see the titles of shows flash up. So it's Volume 1, blah, 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 Volume 2, blah, blah, blah. Almost none of those exist. Because we were in the Krypton Force community that exists. It's me and 4 other people.
Uh-huh.
We were talking about, have you ever seen any of these other volumes? No. And then I was like, well, hang on, they didn't mention the titles in the versions you had. So I know what the titles were, so I can look them up. And this led me to the Australian Board of Film Classification, because everything that got released had to be classified, so censors had to watch it. And I can confirm that most of these never actually reached the classification board, so they don't exist. They had clearly planned to release them. Because some of them, Cybots, I think makes it all the way to Volume 12. The rest peter out around Volume 6 or 4. They just stop.
Uh-huh.
And those were never submitted anywhere for classification. So I think this First Call place it must have gone bankrupt before they finished them. But it's so weird to think about that because these tapes were everywhere. The reason I have all of these, I am missing, I think, 3 in total, and for all I know, those never got released in Australia. But, like, the reason I have them is because when all the video places were getting rid of their VHS stock for DVD, I went to all the video shops I used to go to as a child and I bought them. And I was like, look, you're getting rid of all your VHS stock, can I buy these from you? And they usually said yes. That's where these all come from, with like 2 exceptions.
Wow.
Yeah. Another interesting point about classification.
Yeah.
This comes up in one of the ones we watched, but I want to talk about it now. Is that you get this, like, the Australian classification that the kid safe one is called G, which means general.
Okay.
So it starts with this big G for general exhibition. Then it cuts to a U, and it says British Board of Film Classification. U means universal in the British film classification system. So this was already classified for a British release, and they've just got that British release reclassified and left the British film classification thing on there. So it's like... it's such a weird, botched, like, horrible attempt to release them. So that's our little introduction. This sort of sets the stage for what we're going to be seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the wondrous world of Krypton Force that kept me entertained as a kid, because I guess, like, we'll talk about this now, because it's something that, like, it only really makes sense if you're, like, a millennial or slightly older, is that, like, these VHS tapes came out around the same time as, like, Transformers was on VHS, right?
Mhm.
And, like, Transformers is, like, obviously it's a big, like, influential thing. People remember it. Like, it stuck with the generation. It's not very well animated. Like, I don't mean, like, no one was trying. I just mean, like, it's cheap. It's like everything's very flat, very jerky looking. If you compare that to just any random one of these, like a random episode of, like, the Formators is, like, light years beyond it in terms of, like, you actually have, like, different planes of action. You have, like, everything looks a lot more stylized. So it's really appealing if you're a child, and that's all you have is this, like, really cheap, like, ACOM animated, like, Hasbro stuff. Even in this, like, weird debased form. Like, 70s anime looks amazing in comparison. So that's kind of why this stuff stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's also why Robotech made such a big impact, because, like, if you compare the dogfighting in Robotech to the dogfighting in G.I. Joe, it's like, even though G.I. Joe is, like, I think 10 years later, Robotech looks just phenomenally better.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's so much more fluid. You actually have, like, focal planes going in and out of focus. Like, there's depth to everything. And G.I. Joe is just like, it just looks like a coloring book that is moving.
Yeah.
I mean, no, I'm not shitting on the people who made it, because they probably had no money and they were massively overworked. But, like,
Oh. Yeah.
anyway, these were, like, a good thing to grow up with, in spite of everything bad about them that we're now going to cover. So, Force 5 was 5 series to save us from having to watch 5 hours, because these tapes are 2 episodes very awkwardly stuck together, so they're about an hour long each.
Mhm.
I decided to only cover the Formators, which was their version of Get a Robo G, Orion Quest, which was their version of UFO Robot Grendizer, and Cybots, which was their version of Starzinger. The 2 ones we left out were, one was Mission Prometei, which is their version of Vanguard Ace, and one was the Protectors, which is their version of Guy King. Basically because Vanguard Ace and Guy King are both, like, they're also combining robot shows like Get a Robo, and it just felt redundant to cover them, all 3 of them together. If we had to cut 2, may as well cut those ones. I'm sorry to all the Vanguard Ace fans out there. Vanguard Ace seems largely forgotten these days. Starzinger also pretty much forgotten. It was a real nightmare to find info on Starzinger for this, but I managed to get some. So
Okay.
okay, so out of Orion Quest, the Formators, and Cybots, which one do you want to start with?
I think we should keep the best one for last.
Okay. So Orion Quest is the Force 5 localization of an anime called UFO Robot Grendizer. It is by Go Nagai, who also created Mazinger. And we actually got Mazinger here as well, but it was called Transor. It was called Transor Z. And for some reason, the Australian release of Transor Z, they cut the entire series down to 50 minutes. So it is something like 70 or 80 episodes long. They compress into 50 minutes. It's almost incomprehensible. But basically, because I had like all these Orion Quest tapes and then just all of Mazinger is one thing. I grew up with Grendizer, so it had much more of an impact on me than Mazinger did, even though Mazinger is like the better known one. Grendizer is really interesting in terms of that, in terms of its international impact, because Grendizer is really huge in Italy, it's really huge in France, and it's really, really big in Lebanon.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's really big in all these places that like Mazinger didn't really get a foothold. And it's so big in Lebanon that these two Lebanese artists actually painted a building-size Grendizer mural on a building in Kuwait. They were
Oh my
commissioned to
god.
do it. Yeah, it's massive. Like Grendizer is massive in like the Arab-speaking world, and I think it's honestly to do with like the Mazinger rights were probably tied up in something else, so they got Grendizer instead, and like um there were like covers of the Grendizer theme like in the charts at one point.
Whoa.
Yeah, like it's massive. It's massive in places that like you would not expect, and then if you look at like Japan, it Grendizer is just considered this like sort of side story to the Mazinger thing, which is like the real one. Yeah. So do you know Mazinger much?
You and I have talked about it here and
Yeah.
there, but I've
Yeah.
never actually watched any of that
Yeah.
stuff.
So basically, this is taking place in the same universe as Mazinger,
Okay.
and the character in it who you remember the guy with like the weird hair who had a little UFO?
Yes.
That's the main character of Mazinger. So he basically gets demoted to the sidekick of the main character of Grendizer.
His name is Lance.
His name is Lance in this. In originally he's called
Okay.
Koji Kabuto.
Lance, Koji.
Yeah,
Same thing.
well the main character of Grendizer is named Orion Quest in this. That's his name.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you want to know what his name is in Japanese?
What is it?
Duke Fleed. Delightfully silly name. Yeah, so this is Orion Quest Volume 2. It's Volume 2 of a hypothetical 12, but is actually 2 of 4. Because they didn't release anything after the fourth one. And I picked this because there's some fascinating drama between the aliens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a good and the exact same plot gets repeated in the next one we're watching. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I thought we'd go with this and talk about the saga of Commander Ding. So how did you feel about the primary antagonist of the series being called Commander Ding?
I thought it was very creative.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought of it.
No, no. In the Japanese, he's called Commander Braki. He's a sort of grey-skinned alien vampire-looking man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the villains in Grendizer are. It's like I can't remember if it's meant to be like an empire of different alien races, or it's just like one group of aliens who all look distinct. But basically, like all the main antagonists look completely different.
Hmm.
They all usually have some weird gimmick to their appearance. This is something that like Go Nagai is really really big on. He tends to sort of repeat the same character archetypes and relationships, but he always makes them look very very distinct. So you sort of don't. It doesn't strike you that like oh this character and this character are functionally the same guy. They just because they look so different to each other. So the antagonist of the tapes that we have, because like he's eventually replaced later on, but I don't think we never get that far, is this grey. He looks like a gibbon. He looks like a weird sort of monkey with giant bat ears, who in Japanese is called Commander Braki, but they decided in their wisdom to call him Commander Ding. And Commander Ding, he has an interesting kind of Principal Skinner, Superintendent Chalmers relationship with his superior, who is called General Bellicose, which is an incredibly... It's a very apt name. And as Commander Ding repeatedly fails at his missions, he gets these angry messages that also start with his face appearing going, Ding!
What is it, Ding? You'd better have something good to report this time.
Yeah, so in this episode, Commander Ding is... his relationship with General Bellicose is becoming quite strained.
Yeah.
And his position is threatened when a new, more handsome alien arrives. In the dub, his name is Gorman. And, like, they've changed characters' names. So, like, Braki became Ding. Bellicose's name in Japanese is Gandal. So I'm like, oh, Gorman. Gorman's just like a name. It's just like an Irish name.
Okay.
I guess his name was something else and they just went with Gorman. His name in Japanese is Gorman. I don't know why. So Gorman is this, like, he has the standard Go Nagai head wing design. He sort of looks like a slightly more angular version of Devilman.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the appearance of Gorman?
So what I found really interesting was that the spaceships are actually kids' toys. Or look like them. You know those toys that you put on the floor and you spin around?
Yeah, they look like spinning tops.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
thought that is so cool. And they're super brightly colored.
Yeah, it's a really cool aesthetic. It looks like I designed it. Like everything is like, it's like pastel pink and purple and teal. They're like dominant colors of this like fascist space empire. It's really neat looking. The saucers all have like fins on them. And you see inside them, and it's like this weird sort of like tube network, and everyone's traveling around in these like glass spheres. It looks really cool.
Yeah. And what I found really impressive was that the little sorcerer,
Yeah.
it transforms into a robot and he uses the tops of the sorcerer's shield.
This was the thing about the series, that like every robot that showed up starts as a flying saucer. So they were all called saucer beasts. So every episode is a different saucer beast, and they all have these different ways of transforming from a saucer. That's really, like, every time they would be introduced, it's like a standard UFO, like, big disc thing. And it's like, what's this one gonna do? It's like, sometimes they split open like a turtle, and, like, the thing comes out. Sometimes, like, a head pops out the top and a body pops out the bottom. Sometimes, like, there'll just be a robot inside that comes out like an egg, and they all have really neat designs. So we actually see two in this episode.
Yeah.
Because Ding sends out an ill-fated one that kind of looks like Gamera.
Yes.
So yeah, you have these two flying saucers that like start engaging in space, and then they transform. One of them, the saucer opens up and it becomes like a turtle shell, and these like limbs pop out and has like a turtle head. It also has like a mohawk that it uses like a boomerang, which is really cool. And then the other one splits open. And that's, like you said, like the robot is inside it, so it becomes like a humanoid robot, but with flying saucer like shields on its arms.
It gave me a little bit of a Scorn feel. Because machine and man are one, you know?
Yeah, okay, that's... You're aware that, like, there's a whole series of Transformers, like, you can also watch. Yeah, so the Ding's ill-fated, like, Gamera-looking thing is blown up, and then Gorman announces his presence.
Yeah.
Yeah, so how do you feel about the interaction between Gorman and Ding?
Well, after this badass flying sorcerer fight, it just feels like, hey, you've been messing up, so I'm gonna take your promotion.
Yeah,
It's very like Day in the Office.
it really is. And the first thing Gorman does is he walks in and he's got like a little cane, like this like officer's cane. And he just goes,
Yeah.
"Nice to see you again, ding." They really like the fact they called him Ding.
Nice to see you again, Ding.
One thing I've realized is that this makes no attempt to establish the characters if you haven't seen it before, so you're probably very confused by the next, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, we then see Duke Fleed, who in this series is called Orion Quest, but is living under the assumed identity of Johnny Valconian. Awakens from an angsty nightmare. Yeah, because he's an alien. So he has his angsty dream where he's remembering like his homeland being destroyed, and then this was set like Grendizer is set in Japan, but on this like old-timey western ranch that happens to exist in Japan. The dub, as far as I can tell, just runs with this and assumes it's actually like set in Texas. But all the signs are still in Japanese, and they eat rice balls. So we're now introduced to the characters that inhabit the ranch where Johnny is working. So how do you feel about the hideous monster that is Panhandle Morgan?
Well, when you look at him by himself, it's like, oh, it's not that bad. But when they show him interacting with other characters,
he looks like an old reborn baby.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought.
There is a line later on where he talks about the Old West. And then someone else says, but this is the 21st century. So if that lines up, he's about 200. Yeah. So Johnny is sort of interesting as a character, Johnny/Orion, because one of the things that struck me, like, as a kid is that he's written as a more sort of, like, angsty, mature character than you would usually get in this. Because, like, most of them, they're, like, sort of hot-blooded teenagers. Yeah, whereas this Johnny guy, like, he has extremely 70s, like, flares. He has this, like, vest with all these tassels on it, and he has this, like, wild, unkempt hair, and I'm talking like this because I'm a badass. Like that.
Hang on, Lance. I'll be right there. But Johnny, you're in no condition to fly today. You don't expect me to sit back and let Lance fight my fight, do you?
And he's always brooding and like playing the guitar under trees on moonlit nights and things. Like he's and there's like Panhandle's daughter who's constantly swooning over him because he's so like brooding.
Okay, just as soon as I finish up here.
Well, if it's all right with you, I'll help you.
Yeah, so that was, I guess, something that like as a like it was like 8 or 9 when I saw this. It's like, oh, I've not seen a character like this before. I'm used to like optimistic like teenagers as identification figures, not this like brooding guy who talks like Solid Snake and rides motorcycles.
Have you not seen many action movies?
I was like 8.
Yeah, so was I, but I've seen all the action and horror movies by 8.
Hi, Sophie here. I'd like to introduce my co-host Sin to anyone who's new to the podcast. I guess you were looking up Jim Terry Productions? While my undergraduate was in film production, Sin's was in research, and it's a testament to just how poorly we did that I'm the researcher and she's the editor. Sin grew up in the Soviet Union, where the only way to see American movies was on bootleg VHS tapes. Since these bootlegs had no ratings, Sin's parents let her watch Nightmare on Elm Street, Predator, and the entire Hellraiser series, leading to the very well-adjusted individual we know and love today. Aside from podcasting, Sin's hobbies include ripping trees out of the ground with her bare hands, conspicuously eating giant hunks of meat in front of her unnamed vegetarian co-host, and injuring herself. Despite being 5'1", she's clearly the brawn of the operation. Back to the podcast. Do you have anything else to add?
The voice acting was interesting.
Yes.
They tried to do some accents.
Yeah, and I think this is going to come up much more often in the next one, but the Jim Terry rep company that they have that's doing all these voices, there's about 4 of them. When they try to do a multinational group of characters, it really falls to pieces. Also notice that 2 of the cast's last name is Terry, which I think tells you about the kind of operation it was. Including Jim Terry Jr.
So let me ask you,
Mm-hmm.
as I was watching this, I thought Johnny and Lance had a thing.
Oh, absolutely. It gets the final shot of this tape is very
Late at night, I think of you. Your vision floods my mind. There isn't much I wouldn't do to be sure you're mine.
And also, aliens is a recurrent theme in this universe.
The thing Panhandle does is he is like a UFO obsessive. So he is up there with a telescope constantly watching to see if they're coming, because he doesn't understand that they're trying to kill him yet. So at this point in the series, he's like, oh, aliens, hello, come to Earth. It's not in this episode, but another one he says, I'm the president of the Let's Welcome Aliens to Earth Club. And it takes him a while to catch on that they're trying to kill them all.
Oh.
Yeah, because this ends, way, way, way before the complete Japanese series does, this all goes places, and, the Brenda character ends up getting her own, spaceship that she can fly around in. She gets, a uniform. You don't see it. It's never going to happen in this one. And, the sister from, the other planet shows up, and, she gets her own spaceship as well, so, they're constantly adding characters. But unfortunately, the Krypton Force VHSs stop at, Volume 4, so we never see any of this.
Oh.
Other thing, I guess, of note is that when Panhandle notices the spaceship's coming, he says, Klati Vradi Nikti. Did you get that?
No.
Okay, so this is a reference to The Day the Earth Stood Still, the 50s, sci-fi movie. Because in that, the command word for the robot is Klatu Vrada Nikto.
Okay.
So the idea is, Panhandle is, obsessed with all this old UFO stuff. So he's, saying all these things he's seen in, movies to try to, contact the aliens.
That is so cute.
Yeah. So the plot of this episode is that Gorman, he's going to take out Grendizer once and for all. And Commander Ding is not happy about this.
When I return, we will discuss your new position as my personal bootblack.
So, Grendizer is fighting Gorman.
Mm-hmm.
And Lance joins in his little George Adamski-looking saucer called the TFO. It's short for Terrestrial Flying Object.
Uh-huh.
I don't know why he doesn't bring Mazinger with him. Yeah, I think the in-universe explanation is because Mazinger is replaced with another one called Great Mazinger that's piloted by someone else.
Okay.
So I think the in-universe explanation Koji just retires and becomes a UFO investigator.
Okay.
Yeah, he has this dinky little saucer that's based on do you know the George Adamski UFO photo? It's pretty well known.
UFO photo.
Yeah, that one.
Okay, so start it again. Do you know the blah blah blah?
Okay, so do you know the George Adamski UFO?
Of course.
But the George Adamski UFO, it's, remember when we talked about the Flatwoods Monster, right?
Yeah.
And I was saying, like, okay, the Flatwoods Monster, it took off in Japan. Like, for some reason, this, like, single American thing influenced, like, Japanese alien designs forever, and it became way more influential there than in the US. The Adamski UFO is the same, where, like, pretty much all Japanese depictions of UFOs descend from the George Adamski UFO photo.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so, like, the Koji's little craft is based on this.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's called the TFO for Terrestrial Flying Object. It's crap. You may have noticed this. It gets taken down really quickly. I can understand it at this point in the series, but it drags on for a long time, and he never thinks to, like, can you send my giant robot over, because it'd be really useful. And anyway, you mentioned, like, earlier on that there seems to be, like, there's kind of a thing between Orion and Lance. Yeah, it's really, really, like, the problem with the TFO not being very good is that, like, Grendizer has to keep rescuing him. But then there's usually some situation where he has to then rescue Grendizer, so it's these two guys just, like, constantly having to, like, thank you.
Hang on, Lance. I'll be right there.
It's very sweet. They're, like, constantly, like, admitting their own weakness in front of each other.
Oh, yeah.
Gorman does quite well. He's got his saucer shield things are immune to Grendizer's lasers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did you enjoy the calling attacks part of the fights in this?
At first, I was like, are they screaming something? I couldn't understand what they were saying.
Space Thunder!
Did you like the rainbow beam?
Rainbow Beam!
Of course, I love the rainbow beam.
The rainbow beam is, like, the strongest attack at this point. So it's the thing that's used to finish stuff off in moments of high drama.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is that everything goes into slow motion and sad music starts playing, and then he yells, "Rainbow Beam!" And this, like, multicolored light show happens. So essentially, Gorman has almost defeated Grandizer, and then Command Ding orders his own troops to fire on Gorman
Yeah!
so that he doesn't lose his job.
Saucers, are you mad? Grendizer is the enemy!
Gorman, sometimes enemies are born from conceit.
How dare you!
I think this is good because it's sort of preparing children for work in the office.
Yeah.
And it's telling you, be careful who you trust. Like, they will backstab you for that promotion. You
yeah.
watch out.
Yeah, and it's not even like some karmic thing where Gorman's hoisted by his own petard. No, he's literally just like Ding's like, fuck you, I hate you. I'm deeply envious of your superior abilities, so I'm just gonna kill you. He unfortunately has to report to General Bellicose that Gorman was defeated.
Oh.
Now, I was a little disappointed here.
Why?
Because it doesn't show off General Bellicose's gimmick. So General Bellicose's gimmick is he has a tiny lady living in his head. His face splits open vertically like a door and opens up, and it's hollow, and there's a tiny little lady living in there who kind of looks like Rita Repulsa from Power Rangers.
Oh my god.
And you might think, oh, is she controlling him? No, they're different people and they have arguments. And every time he has to yell at her in the argument, his face has to close again.
That is amazing!
They have these shouting matches, but she's literally living in his head at the time, and she's tiny. She's just a scaled down little, like, witch lady.
That's some David Lynch stuff right there.
I know! But yeah, you don't see it in this episode, which is... I'll see if I can get her. Hang on. She actually kind of looks like you.
Am I the tiny lady living in your head?
It would explain a lot.
Oh my god! She does look like me!
Yeah, she's got the same, like, like
The
the
same
red...
shawl,
The
the
red
same hair.
hair, the shawl. Yeah, you could, yeah.
She has a staff, I have a power fist.
Yeah. So after this happens, we're introduced to one of the Krypton Force motifs that recurs throughout all these tapes, and that's the awkward edit. So, mid-conversation, it just stops and another episode starts.
Especially in this one, I think they go, and our heroes defeated the bad guy yet again. And then there's like music, sunset.
Yeah.
And you think like the credits are gonna roll, but
No,
then it
and then
cuts to a
just it's just
conversation.
something else is happening now.
So Orion was saved, this time by the bravery of a friend and the treachery of an enemy.
Commence deployment of SHAFE and anti-radar mist in Quadrant 16.
Because it's 2 episodes that they've chopped together, and they've done a very bad job.
Yeah.
There's actually some of them literally. You will hear them say "next time on," and it'll cut during the line. It's like "next time on," and then just like another scene. So the next episode in that's actually the same episode. Technically, this is one thing called Vega.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit of a step down, I think, from Gorman. There's not the office drama that we got before, and it's basically they release a radar jamming mist full of mines and try to lure Grendizer into it to detonate the mines, and that's pretty much the plot. It's the one where they kind of imply Panhandle's about 200 years old by having him reminisce about the Old West. There's much more of Professor Valconian, who's the very serious man with the mustache.
Yeah.
Yeah, his job is basically to deliver exposition in a sort of, like, concerned monotone.
It's too soon to be alarmed, and yet I'm sure that cloud is not caused by any natural phenomena.
Also, the plot of this is just that, like, it's going to happen in the next one as well, but basically, like, radar can't penetrate something, so our first instinct is to just fly directly into it. But yeah, it feels like filler. It's not that great.
Yeah, it was just a typical action episode.
It ends with Lance referring to himself as Luke Moonwalker, and them both laughing.
Thanks, buddy.
Oh, stop it. You're embarrassing me. You'd think I was another Luke Moonwalker.
Did you stick around for the ending, like, credits?
No.
There's a really dreamy shot of, like, Johnny, and he's looking, like, into the camera, and then he holds up a flower. And it's like, oh my. They really play up that he's like Edward from Twilight.
Aww.
Everyone is swooning over him. So yeah, that was Grendizer.
It was awesome.
It was.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, Sin. Thank you, Commander Ding, for allowing our hero to live on. Now we're going to move on to the slightly confusingly named Formators, because it is a dub of Getter Robo G, and it's called The Formators. But Krypton Force also did a dub of Guy King that is sometimes called The Formators, but also sometimes called The Protectors, and they can't decide. So if you look at, like, the trailers, they're showing footage from Guy King, but they're calling it The Protectors. And the first episode of The Protectors is called The Formators. This took me a very long time to figure out. Because I'm looking at, like, entries in catalogs, I'm like, what? So yeah, this is a dub of Getter Robo G, which was the sequel series to Getter Robo.
Okay.
This is sort of interesting because, like, it's the only time they do a sequel series. Everything else is self-contained, but, like, Getter Robo G is basically, like, Getter Robo is I don't know if it wouldn't be the first combining robot show, but it's one of the first.
Mm-hmm.
The premise is that there's 3 different spaceships, and they lock together in 3 different ways that give you 3 different robots.
Yeah.
And Getter Robo ends with one of the characters dying. And then apparently, like, they got a call from the toy company that's like, yeah, can you keep this going? So they made a sequel series called Get a Robo G, which necessitated them introducing another character who is functionally the same guy, but he's obsessed with baseball instead of judo. And, since the villain's also dead, they introduced some new villains who we're probably going to talk about quite a bit. So, before we actually get to, like, the plot of this episode of Get a Robo G, this tape is really interesting, and it further complicates the whole which one is the Formators again. Because it opens with this character, right?
Mhm.
Now, this character does not appear in the tape at all. Do you know what they do appear in?
What?
Well, I'm going to send you a still, and this is from another series.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, do you know what series that is?
What is that series?
Transformers. So, they've stolen a character from Transformers. So now I'm going to show you the cover that this is based on. You'll notice that the back cover also has images from Transformers on it.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Those are images that have just been stolen from the Transformers, the children's books they released. Like, they have just stolen Transformers and put them on the back of this tape. So, you'll also notice it's called the Formators, right?
Yes.
Now, underneath the face that's stolen from Transformers, there's a robot, right?
Yeah.
That robot doesn't show up in the series at all. Yeah, do you want to know what that robot is?
What is that robot?
That robot is Guy King, which is a completely different series.
Oh my god.
That's the show that they call The Protectors. So, like, even the cover of the tape cannot decide what this show is. It's simultaneously The Protectors, The Formators, and Transformers. It's such a fucking catastrophe. Like, it's impossible to make any sense of. This is also, like, you get this little intro to, like, this is the Formators, and they do the thing that the trailer does, where they've overlaid something over the footage, but it cuts out. Nothing's been resized, so the border is just cutting off about 75% of the frame, and you can't make any of it out.
It's very disorienting.
Yeah. They all do. You also notice that the way that they do a line, like, they don't want to have to draw a straight line, so they've just typed tilde over and over again to, like, make this line. I'm not going to say that they didn't know how to use the program, but it's the sort of thing you would do if you didn't know how to use a program. There's also some parts where, like, every letter is underlined, but the underlines are all separate for some reason. It's so... and I think they're doing this because they're cutting off the original titles that had the Force 5 stuff written on them, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this introduces us to the Formators. Described by our narrator as a team of pilots who fly a robot superior strength to any other robot. Which is exactly what you want to hear when you're 8, so, like, I was on board. So in this much the same way as Orion Quest was set in, like, ? Texas ? This is set in Britain.
Okay.
So in Orion Quest it kind of made sense, because they were cowboys. I have no idea why they decided to set this in Britain. But everyone is talking like this! It's not like it's a one-off character. Like, everyone outside the 3 main characters has a, like, Dick Van Dyke style, like, Mary Poppins, like, God blimey accent, and they can't keep it up.
Good luck, Foul Tip. You bring us back some good news, huh? Something seems to be worrying you, Father.
It's just that they're flying out to take on the enemy over a new fortified island base. We don't know what new weapons they might have or what tactics they plan to use against the Starvengers.
So in this show, the robots were built by a man called Professor Copernicus. And I love his design. Because he looks permanently disheveled. Like, we're used to, like, science fiction scientists being, like, guys in white coats who are very serious. Professor Copernicus looks like he's on a bender. Like, he hasn't shaved, his hair is a mess. He's, like, kind of, like, overweight. He looks like he's sort of a bit burned out. And he's just, like... You can kind of imagine he's, like, sweating the whole time. He kind of looks like a cartoon of Super Mario.
Yeah, that's what I thought when I saw it.
You believe this guy has been up making a robot for 72 hours.
Yeah, he's overworked. He's overstressed.
It's a very, very good representation of what academics are actually like. So the premise of this episode of The Formators is that ships are going missing in the Pandemonium Triangle. Yeah, so we have the three pilots of the Starvenger robot.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the hot-headed guy called Hummer.
Mm-hmm.
There's the serious guy called Paladin. And then there's Foul Tip. Within the series, his name is technically Elmer Fossil, but everyone calls him Foul Tip.
Why?
Because he's a baseball player, and a foul tip is a thing in baseball.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, I had to look it up. I'm like, I feel like for either the British accents or a main character being called Foul Tip, to have made it this far into production is an oversight, but both of them together, someone wasn't at the controls. And it's about to get much worse when we're introduced to the villains. So the villains of Ghetto Robo G are called the 100 Demon Empire. The villains of the original Ghetto Robo were called the Dinosaur Empire, and they were from underground, and it's actually we talked about Darling in the Franxx recently on another podcast. This is basically where Darling in the Franxx stole its villains from. It makes sense because the Studio Trigger are like Ghetto Robo obsessives, but yeah. So in having defeated the Dinosaur Empire, they needed new villains. So a bunch of alien they're Japanese oni things, like they like people with horns. And they all have slightly different horns. And they're like, they'll have some of them have like red skin and like big robes and things. And then, so we're introduced to the Pandemonium Empire, and the leader, who is called Emperor Ramzorch, is like, my plan is working. And then it cuts to his subordinates, and you might think to yourself, that guy on the left kind of looks like Hitler. And he talks like this. He goes, Emperor Ramzorch, the plan is proceeding perfectly.
We must wait and make our first attack count.
And you're like, oh, questionable. And then they talk to him. Sin, do you want to say what this character's name is?
Captain Fuhrer.
Yes, his name is Captain Fuhrer. So, I looked this up on the Ghetto Robo wiki. And in Japanese, he's called Hidla.
Oh my god.
And he's simply described as a field commander who resembles Adolf Hitler. So they it's like a one step forward, two steps back situation where they're like, calling this character Hidla, bit on the nose, could be construed as somewhat offensive. We better change the name. I know. Captain Fuhrer. And if you think, this is clearly like a weird one-off, he's the regular villain.
Did he ever explain why?
I did a little bit of reading on the Getter Robo wiki. I don't know how accurate this is. But apparently, like, the backstory of a lot of the demon empire is that they're implied to be humans who were resurrected as demons.
Ah.
Well, no, your R implies this is actually just Hitler. They brought Hitler back with horns and gave him a spaceship. But he's not the main villain. He's like the comedy bumbling one. So basically, the thesis statement of Get a Robo G is, okay, Hitler was bad, but you know who's really bad? Emperor Ramsorch from another planet. So the Pandemonium Empire, they blow up a ship. It does a thing a lot of anime dubs did, where they try to cover the fact people are dying with a line. So he says, like, blow up the ship and then take them prisoner. I'll see them in chains in my dungeon. We never see anyone on that ship again.
Never saw any dungeons.
They're just dead. They're dead. They're trying to cover up the fact people died in this. My favorite example of this is actually G.I. Joe the movie.
Okay.
Where they had initially planned for one of the characters in it to die, and at the last minute they realized they didn't want him to die, so on screen he is speared through the heart and collapses and there's blood everywhere.
Okay.
And then off camera someone says, he's gone into a coma. And you never see him again for the remainder of the show.
Okay.
But at the very end, someone again says, off camera, great news, he's out of his coma. Which is their response to killing Optimus Prime not going very well.
Aww.
So yeah, surprisingly, like, people do die in these series.
Mm-hmm.
So the Get a Robo team set out to find out what's going on in the Pandemonium Triangle.
Yeah.
And they are lured into a trap.
Help! Help down here! Help!
One of the 100 Demon Empire is disguised as a survivor of the shipwreck.
Mm-hmm.
Of which there were no survivors. Like, the only survivor you see on screen is that guy. He wasn't really on it. Everyone on that ship is now dead. They're all dead. They're not in the dungeon, they're dead. So they sort of follow the trail of, like, the Pandemonium Empire have a base here, and they discover Ramsorch's, like, his sort of floating fortress. Do you want to talk about how much Ramsorch just loves this floating fortress?
Yeah, the bad guy likes his fortress a lot.
He never shuts up about how cool his floating fortress is. This whole he's like, it's like he's just bought a new car. My floating fortress can defend itself from anything, like, constantly. And it's then almost immediately like, oh shit, actually, because all the floating fortress's cannons aim upward at a 45-degree angle, meaning that the weakness of your fortress that is on the ocean is attacks that come from the water's surface or below the surface of the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, making it the absolute most useless thing to be like a naval base.
What's the matter with them? They just keep coming without trying any counterattack. Perhaps they realize how futile it is to challenge my island fortress.
So Captain Führer suggests they retreat. And Ramsorch, who canonically outranks Hitler, tells him that they're not going to retreat. Instead, they'll deploy one of their mechs to, like, defend the base of the fortress.
I loved the squid mech.
It's so cool.
It's super cool. It's like this pink squid, and on top of it, there's this mecha. But one of the mecha's hands is like an axe, and the other one is a robot arm,
Yeah.
and then the head has spikes. It's like a mecha Cenobite.
It's like that, also like a mecha version of Ursula from The Little Mermaid. Where it's like a human torso with like tentacles under it.
Yeah.
So like the mecha in Getter Robo G, they're all called Mecha Oni in Japanese. And like the Getter Robo wiki, it didn't have much info in Getter Robo G, unfortunately, but I suspect that like the Mecha Oni thing is literal and they're supposed to be based on actual like mythological Oni. Because there is an Oni that is part like snail like / octopus called the Sazai Oni. That's like a sort of like a conical shell with tentacles that come out the bottom. So I think that's what it's supposed to be.
Super cool.
Yeah. So basically, yeah, Ramzorge realizes that a sea-based fortress that can't defend itself from the sea wasn't great, and he just sort of like skedaddles. And and yeah, the squid robot's defeated.
Yeah.
And then it's awkward edit time.
Well, almost home again, fellas.
So it's yet another story about a mysterious island in the sea. This is a recurring thing that, like, Floating Fortress is actually, like, their base. Like, it keeps showing up. So there's this recurring thing of, like, okay, there's going to be a lot of stuff happening at sea. That's why, like, you'll notice that the three formations are called Arrow, Dragon, and Poseidon. So, like, Poseidon, like, specifically is designed for water combat. So I think they were trying to make it a little more like we have to justify why there's a whole lot of fights underwater in this show. So this episode, like, I mentioned in the Orion Quest one that, like, Brenda eventually gets her own, like, uniform and jet and stuff. We already get that at this point with the Getter Robo equivalent. Where, like, Ceres, who is the daughter of Professor Copernicus, is like, I'm worried about them! She gets her own little spaceship.
Yeah.
And she gets to jet. She doesn't get to like pilot like a proper robot, but she gets to jet around with them. So there's a little bit more to do. Interestingly, her costume has defined nipples on it.
It does?
She wears like a red, like form-fitting thing, but with big yellow nipples. It's really distracting.
Oh my god. Well, you know what? I didn't notice that. But speaking of nipples, at some point there's a bad guy shows up whose father was betrayed by Captain Fuhrer and
Don't
framed.
spoil it.
Oh, I apologize.
Don't spoil G-Ray.
But basically a bad guy that we see later wears this suit.
Yes.
There's more. It's 4 nipples. And I thought, oh, maybe it's like some weird oversight and they didn't think it through. No, because the followers of Jiray are all wearing the 4 nipple suits.
Yeah, the other thing that, like, you notice is that if you saw that design, you'd think, oh, he's got a helmet with horns. No, he has a helmet with holes for his horns.
That's true.
How does he put it on? There is no physical way with that horn configuration that he could put that helmet on.
Okay, but what if it's like made out of rubber?
It's either that or he'd have to split it in half and like connect it later. But yeah, this episode, it's remarkably similar to the Orion Quest one with Gorman. Except instead of Ding being worried about being replaced, it's Captain Fuhrer.
Yeah.
Yeah, Captain Fuhrer is he's incompetent, he's bumbling. He's a bit of a funny character. And he is threatened with replacement by the dashing young Jiray. And there's a brilliant introductory scene where Jiray walks in and then you hear Captain Fuhrer go, Lieutenant Jiray, the son of General Jiray. And then Ramzotch goes, you're of the Jiray clan.
I am Lieutenant Jiray, sire.
Lieutenant Jiray, the son of General Jiray.
So, you are a member of the Jiray family. I take it you have a way to defeat the Starvengers?
So you get the angsty backstory of Jiray,
Yeah.
which is that Jiray's father was framed by Captain Führer.
Yeah.
When Jiray was a child, and Jiray's back to get revenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's more office politics, where if Jiray successfully traps the Starvengers, he'll get promoted above Captain Führer.
Mm-hmm.
Captain Führer's not having it.
No. And there's this weird flashback when Jiray remembers that his father was, like, taken away in front of his eyes. And the
Yeah.
flashback has a lot of, like, cuts and random zoom-ins. It was
Yeah.
very strange.
What's the traumatic memory of a child whose father was framed by Space Hitler?
General Jiray, I arrest you on charges of treason.
You framed me, Führer.
So the plan is basically that Jiray has a mech with a detachable head. Don't worry, it all makes sense. So Jiray sends his stupid detachable mech head out, right?
Yeah.
The Starvengers defeat the body and then the head detaches.
Mm-hmm.
The head then flies back to the floating fortress, and the Starvengers follow the head in, thinking, okay, this is our chance because the fortress door is open.
Yeah.
Jiray then closes the door behind them.
Oh, no.
Apparently they were unaware this was going to happen. They just ran into the enemy base without a plan. And when that happens, a series of comical robot clamps appear and just hold the Starvenger in place.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
you know what? You think, oh, this is so comical and silly. Then Jiray gets out a giant saw. And he's like, I'm going to decapitate you guys. And you're like, oh, clearly they're going to get out of this before anything happens. No!
No.
They
Yeah.
start decapitating the robot. Like, they literally cut off an arm.
Well, this is something that happened a lot in these shows. Like, they put the robots through a lot.
Yeah.
Like, you could have fights with, like, robots, like, losing limbs and having, like, giant holes punched in them, and they would keep going. Yeah, so this is happening, and, like, while it's happening, Jiray is, like, thinking of, like, his father, and how he's going to restore honor to the Jiray clan.
Mm-hmm.
But then,
Oh.
it short-circuits somehow.
What's happening?
Short circuit.
As Jiray's, like, plan collapses around him, he looks and he sees one of, like, his followers. And then this follower removes the disguise. And she says, "It's Captain Führer's agent." It's just, I just love that there's a character whose title is Captain Führer's agent. And Jiray realizes that he's been had because there was a mole working for Captain Führer, sabotaged everything.
Yeah.
And so Jiray realizes that he's been had, and he moves to his detachable head robot, which has a built-in self-destruct button. And he presses it as the Starvengers are escaping, and he gives a very moving speech where he says, "I was not beaten by you. I was betrayed." And then he throws his head back and goes, "Betrayed by the Führer!" And then you see this cutaway of Captain Führer going, and then they fly off and they talk to Ceres. And she says, "Oh, you escaped." And they said, "Yeah, we'll tell you about our victory one day. It's a bit of a weird story." And it's like, yeah, because your story is that you were saved by Hitler.
And now we move on to the best show on the tape.
I'm really glad you liked this one.
I loved it. It was beautiful. It was well animated. The
Yeah.
dub was full of emotion.
It really is.
The characters are interesting. It was overall the best one.
Yeah, so this is called Cybots. And it is the adaptation of an anime called Starzinger. Starzinger itself is a sci-fi retelling of Journey to the West. Did you pick up on that?
No.
How well do you know Journey to the West?
I played Enslaved.
Okay, kind of, right. So Journey to the West, very famous Chinese story. It's been adapted a bunch of times, such as Enslaved. Story of that is that there is a priest, and he, actually is played by a woman, sometimes has to go on a pilgrimage, and they are assisted by 3 spirits. There is a monkey spirit, who is the Sun Wukong character that is pretty well known, even if you don't know Journey to the West. You'd know the Monkey King, who's he rides on a cloud, he has a staff. Goku from Dragon Ball's kind of derived from him.
Mm-hmm.
And the priest controls him with a crown on his head. They're joined by a river spirit and a pig spirit. And traditionally, the river spirit is depicted as very tall and sort of serious, and the pig spirit is this short, fat guy who's really greedy and sort of indulged and lustful. And they all go on a journey to the West to basically learn holy wisdom, and then when they get there, it's actually what you learned on the way was the wisdom.
Aww.
I know. It's another thing that made a big impression on me as a kid, because there's a very well-known Chinese TV series based on this that was made in the 70s, and it was dubbed into English, and it was shown as Monkey. And I grew up watching Monkey, so when I first saw this, I'm like, oh, I get it. It's Monkey, Sandy, and Pigsy on their journey. And so the thing about the Jim Terry version is that they kind of remove that motif in the dub and make it a Three Musketeers motif.
Oh my god! Now that you say it, yes.
Yeah. They're called Dart, Aramis, and Porthos. Yeah, so that's D'Artagnan, Aramis, and Porthos for the Three Musketeers.
Yes.
And before this was Krypton forced-ized into Cybots, it's actually called Spaceketeers. And at the end of the first episode, they say, we're the 3 Spaceketeers.
Oh.
Yeah. And the series itself, not just the characters, is a very loose adaptation of Journey to the West.
Mm-hmm.
So you really liked this one.
I loved it.
Okay, can you give us the recap of what happens in Cybots episode 6?
Basically, Porcos gets a calling from a beautiful flower planet, where he encounters Mae West.
Yes.
Oh, why don't you come down and see me?
Then turns out that she's a bad guy.
Yeah, well, she's a complex character. We'll get to it.
Yeah, but she's also an associate of Trix Khan, which is another bad guy they dealt with.
Yeah.
Who's also making people work in the mines or something.
Trix Khan is the recurring villain for the first chunk of the series.
Okay.
So this is set after they thought they defeated him by sending him into a black hole, and then he kind of comes back out. And he's helped out by a ridiculous pink catfish monster that talks like Julia Child.
Trix, you look all right. I'll send a spaceship to pick you up and bring you back to the planet Decos.
Wait, before that, I want to stop at the planet Jewel.
the thing that's frustrating about this episode is that, like, they stumble on this planet with the flower, and the flower is complex or bad, working with the bad guy, and so they figure it out. Now they gotta defeat a bad guy. But the bad guy has a dragon, and then it ends.
Yeah, and you might think, well, alright, Sophie's got all of this. She'll know what happens in episode 7. Episode 7 just starts with them asleep. This is no connection to what happened previously.
That is really annoying.
I know. So, the villains for this, it's kind of 3 villains. There's a villain of the episode, and then there's the 2 recurring villains. So the villain of the episode is a flower, which, as you've alluded to, talks like Mae West.
When I'm good, I'm very good. But when I'm bad, I'm better.
They seem to like doing this. There's another episode where there's oysters that talk like Peter Lorre.
Is this the guy who talks a little bit like this?
No, the line is like,
If the energy is reversed, I will revert to being a simple mollusk again. I cannot stand the thought of being riveted motionless to the seabed.
They clearly had a lot of fun.
You know who this reminds me of? I can't remember their name, but it's the villain from Crash Bandicoot with the rocket in his head.
Alright.
My mechanical marvel will hypnotize you and I.
Her motivation is boredom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll come back to her after explaining the 2 recurring villains. So the 2 recurring villains are called Trix Khan, who kind of looks like a blue koala.
You know who he reminded me of?
Who?
Мышерокер с Марса. It's a show. In Russian, it's called Mice Who Are Rockers from Mars.
Oh, Biker Mice from Mars.
Yeah, there we go. He's like the older mouse.
So I like him because he's very, very serious and melodramatic.
Yeah.
And the reason that works is because he's paired with whatever the fuck Dector is supposed to be. It's like a fish or like a cucumber or something. It's a ridiculous, like, pink. What would you, like a frog?
I wasn't sure. I thought it was a duckfish.
I have no idea what Dector is supposed to be. Dector has this, like, Julia Child way of talking.
All the treasures I have collected throughout the galaxy are here. All my silver, gold, and jewels. I will never leave them behind.
You mean you die for mere silver and gold? That is stupid, since you can collect all you want when you establish a colony.
And they have these, like, arguments. It's like bickering back and forth. And you don't see that much of it, but basically the plot is that Trix Khan was stuck in a black hole previously, and Dector is trying to get him out.
Mm-hmm.
And he rescues Trix Khan, and then Trix Khan is like, well, no, because I left all my treasure behind on the planet with the Rose Lady. I have to go get it before we can meet up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he goes back and he talks to her. And then this sort of goes into a bit more detail about, like, her motives, because she's actually, like, it's a bit more complicated than it initially seems. Because initially it seems like, okay, this Rose Lady, she's just like a siren. She's like calling to Porkos, like, hey, come down and see me. It turns out she's literally rooted to the ground. Her roots are chained into the soil and she can't move, even though she can shapeshift between a rose and a person. When she's a person, because she's still chained up, she can't move. So she lures Porkos down and she says, you have to rescue me, because I've been chained up by Trix Khan. So he does. Trix Khan then arrives later on, and he's like, why are you free? And so, well, I had to get someone to dig me up because I was bored. And that is that she's not lying. Like, that's her motivation. Throughout the whole thing is she's bored. Like, she's literally, she's a conscious being who's rooted to this spot.
Yeah.
And she can't move. And now the backstory of the character, as is the story between a lot of the characters in this, particularly the villains, is that she used to be like a normal thing. She literally used to be a flower. And then what happened was this like energy sort of like escapes and puts the universe out of balance. And it turns her from a regular flower into like a sentient demon flower that can think and like reason and stuff. And that's where she develops a consciousness. It's actually kind of like Souls in Demon Souls, like everything got a soul one day. Yeah. And her motive is literally like, if they succeed in their mission, the Cybots, that energy will go away and I'll go back to being a rose. So basically, they're going to kill her if they succeed. And that's like, actually, like, it's not really clear that that's the right thing to do, because all the villains and things like this, like mollusks and like rats and things that have become sentient. If they succeed, all those things go back to being animals and plants again.
Mm-hmm.
So they're effectively kind of killing them.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that aspect. When she talks to Trix Khan, I looked this up. This is in the Japanese. The English kind of skirts around it, but he says to her that, no, I chained you up for your own good. Because if this energy goes away and you go back to being a plant, if you're not in the ground, you're going to die.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he chained her up.
Yeah, it was very sweet.
Yeah, so because if she's out of the ground and she goes back to being a flower, her roots aren't connected to anything, so she just dies.
Yeah.
So it's actually it's kind of complicated for something that you watch as an 8-year-old. Yeah, so Trix Khan and Dektor are based loosely on two Journey to the West characters who are just called Goldenhorn and Silverhorn. And they're these two, like, bickering demon brothers who are antagonists in this. It's a platypus and a mud skipper.
You know when Porcus was called to the planet and the flower lady is like, I have all this treasure for you. If you help me. He's like, I can buy all the food in the galaxy with this.
Yeah, he's a not particularly complex character. He's just like, he has a number of good lines that like stuck with me. Because his spaceship is called the Space Hog. And the lasers are called the Hog Phasers, so every time he does, he goes, Hog Phasers! He has rocket feet that he calls the Tojectiles. And there's a specific line that stuck with me when he's like breaking her free from the chains.
Yeah.
But she's like, oh, darling, be careful. And he's like, don't worry, my little strawberry sundae, I'm gentle as a lamb.
Yeah.
It's like, I feel like they put a little bit more effort into this than the other ones. Yeah.
It was like humorous. And there's another thing that I thought was cute when he's like, she's beautiful and she has treasure, which makes her even more attractive.
It's just like character notes, he's greedy. He's greedy and lazy.
Yeah, because then he just falls asleep.
Yeah, and then it's like, to be fair, if they succeed at this, like, she goes back to being a rose. So it's in everyone's best interest that he just sits here on a giant pile of jewels forever. Like, everyone kind of succeeds.
Mm-hmm. There's one line by Flame, the flower lady, where she catches the girl protagonist, and she's like,
I'm gonna deflower Aurora's power.
It's a little suggestive. It's like at the second they decided to make her Mae West, like everything just gets this like sexual undercurrent.
Yeah, and this one, it's not even Mae West. It's Alaska doing Mae West on RuPaul's Drag Race.
Do you think if they made this into a movie, Alaska should be Flame?
100%.
It's amazing.
When I'm good, but when I'm bad, I get a serious venereal disease.
Because it's an ongoing series, so like this isn't so much resolved. They just sort of like beat Flame and leave.
Mm-hmm.
It then like abruptly cuts to just something else happening as is usual.
It's obvious.
Now might be a time to like discuss the other very odd dub choice, which was to voice Jessie Dart, who is nominally the main character in the series, as the squeaky-voiced teenager from The Simpsons.
Yeah!
It's the Trix Khan's treasure!
I'm gonna blow it up!
This is getting to be a bad habit. Wrong way porcos is what we'll call you.
I did not understand this choice. Because at first when I was watching this, I was like, oh, well, he's not going to talk much. That's why they're having a fun little joke.
No, he's the main character. Do you know what's really messed up?
What?
There's another dub of this by the same studio.
Okay.
That Krypton Force also released. Okay. Where he just has the same voice as Lance from Grendizer.
Oh my goodness.
He just talks like a normal, like, heroic guy. But in this one, it's like... I'm gonna use my Astro Bat! Yeah, so this is basically just, it fills up Trix Khan's backstory a little about... this is why I love melodramatic Trix Khan, because he describes being trapped in the black hole.
Yeah.
But he says it like, they put me in the hole and left me there to be squeezed. It's like being compacted in the like gravitational pull of a collapsed star. It's just like, I was squeezed. It's just this sort of like embarrassing inconvenience.
He's very like dramatic, and he always talks like he has caps lock on.
Yeah.
My friend, I am prepared for them this time and will destroy them. Then we will be free to rule the galaxy in any way we wish.
There's also one part where his pink friend is like, listen, you need a vacation. Like, you need to calm down.
Yes! A nice vacation on the planet Renfa!
Yeah! But then Trix is like...
It's tough.
I understand. I will guide you to the planet of the Drangle.
That's better.
Like it was all a ruse?
They've stolen my treasure and embarrassed me. I know so many of these by heart because I watched them over and over again when I was like 9. Yeah, so this episode is about Trix Khan runs a diamond mine, and it's staffed by tiny little elf people who he just tortures and murders because he's evil.
Yeah, it's so like, what?
They talk like the little slug who cannot lie.
Girl, that's my note!
Yeah. Please, Trix Khan, please let us go! And then, right, the implication is that they're dying of radiation poisoning.
Yeah!
We have always done as you have ordered us, but now you must let us go. Please, show kindness, please. Let us go.
Let us go! Never! Get back to the mines!
They're on camera, like, dying of radiation sickness. He then shoots them and he's like, I'm using my sleep gun. You're just killing them. And then you get, Dart notices Trix Khan's treasure. And he says, like, a lot of people have suffered for this. I better blow it up. just destroys all of this stuff. And then Trix Khan's like, it's alright, I have my faithful Drango. Which is a really bad anagram of dragon.
Mm-hmm.
It's worse than Drogon. And then... So it ends with this, like, actually kind of moody shot of, like, all these mechanical dragons, like, emerging from the mist.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's over. Episode 7, they're just asleep in bed, and, like, Porkos is complaining about working nights. It's never resolved.
Maybe the implication is that the previous episode was a dream.
It would make a lot of sense, honestly.
Hello, President of From Software, Hidetaka Miyazaki here. I have been asked to come on this podcast to explain what the fuck is an Ebroitus?
Hello, Mr. Miyazaki.
What the fuck is this?
Well, Mr. Miyazaki, I'm a great one that Thin accidentally summoned one time when she was trying to summon a Priatus, but got the name wrong because she was feeling very, very tired. And ever since then, I've hung around to keep them company.
I had nothing to do with this. Yui, is this fucking Ibruwa, this thing yours? This is, Yui, this, I swear to fucking God, Yui, this is just like the time you said you were gonna bring back...
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Miyazaki. Now, back to the podcast.
Glued two spiders together, stuck a fucking laser beam in it.
Yeah, so that was 60% of Force 5. So I mentioned that, like, there was a little coda to this story.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, there's two. Okay. So the first one is, these tapes, Australian versions really goddamn cheap. And they have on them, like, these tapes have been used before they were Krypton Force. Because at the end of the tapes, there's usually, like, 1 or 2 frames of something else.
Oh my god!
So, like, this is something we need to explain to people who grew up with DVD. Like,
right.
Tapes just played out till they ran out of tape. So if you had, like, a 2-hour tape with a 90-minute movie on it, there was half an hour of nothing at the end of it, just black, or static, like, just nothing. The Krypton Force ones, they all have about, like, 5 to 10 minutes of blankness at the end of them. But the blankness ends up at some point including, like, 1 or 2 frames from something else, because I am certain these are just recycled tapes. Like, they just bought, like, probably just a bunch of blank VHSs in bulk and just dubbed this onto them.
Mm-hmm.
So it is, like, just to hammer home the weird creepypasta feel of this.
Mm-hmm.
I've rescued 2 of them. These are 2 of the final frames of those tapes.
Holy moly!
I feel like I'm cursed now.
That is some Ringo stuff right here.
I know. But yeah, like, these tapes just seem to have been recycled by whoever the fuck First Call were, because they weren't Krypton Force. They were something else.
Mm-hmm.
So to, like, end this on something of a cliffhanger,
mm-hmm.
I have, like, some information about First Call. Because when I bought all of these tapes, one of them, of the, like, 16 that I bought, it still had on it a sticker that was, like, listing the distributor. So this tape has on it, it says supplied by First Call, and it has a phone number. I looked it up, apparently it's in Queensland. Like, I assume First Call don't exist anymore, but I think that's a Queensland number. So if we, like, I don't know, went through, like, Queensland's records from the early 90s, we could maybe find out who the hell owned that number.
Okay, looks like this turned into a podcast mystery.
All right then. This is better than any true crime podcast you've ever listened to. Because remember the guy from the trailer, he's not in the British ones, he's only on the Australian ones. Is this his number?
If my cell phone was charged, I'd call this number right now.
We'd call him and just be like, "Hi kids. See you're interested in my space cartoons."
Sophie, do the outro.
That was episode 1 of the reboot of It Can't Be Helped, which I think means episode 4 overall. Episode 4/1, because we did 4 of It Can't Be Helped, didn't we? 3.
Well, does Reborn count?
No. Reborn is the policy.
I apologize. Look at Sophie putting me in my place. Well, thank you, Sophie, for this informative podcast. You taught us a lot today. Thank you for rescuing these VHS tapes.
That's fine. I have a lot of rescued VHS tapes.
So we'll be doing this for a while.
I have a DVD of a show it's illegal to sell now because of a court ruling. Because there's a lot, like, I've shown it off on live streams, but, like, that wall that's just DVDs, a lot of that is, like, that's my personal supply. That's like my own private vintage. So yeah, join us next time when, if all goes according to plan, we'll be doing the Ultraviolet anime that no one has heard of. Because it combines our, like, overlapping interests of, like, obscure shit, anime, and Mila Jovovich.
Again, thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, Sin, for watching this with me. I'm glad that you got to see the Mae West flower.
And thank you everyone for joining us and making it till the end. And see y'all next time!
Bye!
Bye!
Hi, Sophie here with a little bit of an epilogue to this discussion. I actually made good on my threat to use the phone number that was in the VHS case to figure out where First Call / Krypton Force Australia was based, and I found it in an old Queensland business directory, and I won't show you the actual address, I'll just show you on this map here, and it's actually a pretty ritzy residential area right next to the coast. Which is really not what I was expecting. I was expecting some, like, dilapidated inner-city warehouse, but no, it was on the coast near Surfers Paradise. The directory also revealed that First Call was dissolved in 1992, which is when I was 8, which lines up with when I saw all of these, and also explains why no other ones came out, because by the time I'd seen them, the company probably didn't exist anymore. I have been, so far, unable to locate the guy who did the trailer, but, I mean, they found Clockman, so weirder things have happened.